We have nothing to fear from these Romulans. They are simply boys, who think of war only as an elegant duel of starships among the heavens. They do not know what awaits them on the ground, beyond the reach of their warbirds. A brutal combat of men and machines, where some are vaporized in a flash, others are cut down by blades, like in ancient days. A battlefield on which death is as sudden as it is random, where the gallant cavalryman in his armoured overtank is as vulnerable as the lowly conscript, cowering in his foxhole, where officers and men alike are cut and gunned down all the same. Here there is no winning strategy, no so-called tactics, just the endless slaughter. That is the reality they now face. While often overlooked, suborbital or ground combat on the surface of planetary bodies was both frequent and a key feature of the Dominion War. While previous conflicts were marked by occasional suborbital engagements over key strategic worlds, never before had infantry engagements been so frequent, and on such a large scale. This was due in no small part to the size and scale of the fleets involved, often comprising up to 100 ships, if not more. The ability of both sides to field such large starfleets was irrevocably tied to the necessity of ground combat in this period. While the ability for each side to muster such large fleets is partially due to the developments in manufacturing, such as replicators and other similar technology allowing the rapid construction of starships, it would all be for naught if the infrastructure to support these armadas did not exist. In order for most starships to function, they require three things: deuterium, dilithium, and antimatter. While most modern starships are able to passively replenish their deuterium supplies using Betazid ram scoops, during wartime this becomes a far less reliable means of replenishing your deuterium supply, since hundreds of starships will travel across a relatively narrow area of space, quickly depleting the naturally occurring deuterium stocks. Dilithium crystals are however far harder to come by and must be mined and refined. Thus, dilithium cannot be easily replenished by a fleet on the move. But the most critical element to modern interstellar travel is antimatter. Not naturally occurring, it is impossible for a starship to replenish its supply mid-voyage. Antimatter can only be obtained from antimatter refineries, often located on or near planetary bodies, since they possess an abundant supply of deuterium which is necessary for the production of antimatter. While in the 23rd century such infrastructure was limited to a small number of worlds, making them vital strategic assets, with the ubiquity of space travel in the 24th century, such infrastructure became increasingly common, with most inhabited worlds having at least one of these three vital assets. Thus, in order to ensure the continued operation of one's fleet, taking and holding these assets is a necessary and critical component of any large-scale operation. Beyond these logistical concerns, there are other reasons to secure a planetary body, often revolving around the overall astropolitical objectives in a war. It matters little if you destroy the enemy starfleet only to be repelled by a planet's inhabitants. Thus, securing a planetary body is a key form of political leverage through which one can secure political or territorial concessions from an enemy. Indeed, the use of planetary landings as a political statement rather than as a pragmatic necessity was a very common practice during the Cardassian border wars, in which the Cardassians would attempt to capture and hold Federation colonies in the hope of extracting political concessions. In fact, the Cardassian border war very much foreshadowed the future realities of ground combat in the Dominion War. As to why this happens, we must first look at how suborbital combat comes about and develops from space combat. Many are quick to ask, why does the attacker not threaten orbital bombardment and force a surrender? The reasons vary across history, but in the case of the Dominion War, there are two main reasons why large-scale orbital bombardment is not viable. The first being that for reasons of politics or logistics, the planet's defenders know that you want something on the planet's surface, which you cannot risk destroying, not to mention the astropolitical implications of glassing an entire planet. Therefore, the defender is generally in a position to call the invader's bluff. The second being that most planets in the 24th century possess some form of planetary defense, which prevents an attacker from issuing such threats. This can take the form of hard, soft, and active defenses. Soft defenses are the most common, often taking the form of a simple transporter inhibitor all the way up to powerful dampening fields, which disable all electronic equipment. Systems such as these are often used on frontier colonies as a cheap, low-power method to deter invaders, making the act of landing much harder. However, because of their simplicity, these systems can also be used by an attacker carrying mobile field emitters to protect against attack via transporter systems and to hide from orbital observation. Larger, more populated worlds, as well as key installations, will make use of hard defenses. This can be something as simple as burying a base inside an asteroid, to something as complex as a full-scale planetary shield grid. Such defenses not only protect the planet from bombardments and transporters, but also prevent shuttlecraft from landing, meaning that ships in orbit must first destroy the shield, thus exposing themselves to the third kind of defense, active defenses. These can range from something as simple as an asteroid deflection array to a vast interconnecting web of surface emplacements and orbital weapons platforms, which through coordinated fire can bring down almost any starship. With most planets possessing at least one of these three defenses, and the most populous worlds possessing all three, it is clear why planetary landings are necessary in order to secure the conquests made by a starfleet. As a result of the various defenses, these landings must be carried out by shuttlecraft directly delivering troops to the planet's surface, often coming under fire themselves. The oldest and most distinguished example of such assault shuttles or landing craft is the Cardassian Regnar-type assault shuttle, first deployed in 2350 during the Border Wars. The Regnar was designed specifically to facilitate the rapid deployment of troops to a planet's surface. With a length of 27 meters, a wingspan of 20 meters, and standing 6.5 meters tall, the Regnar is comparable to a Starfleet runabout, yet unlike its Federation counterpart, it is built exclusively for combat. Operated by a pilot, a co-pilot, and two gunners, the Regnar is capable of swiftly delivering a full platoon into combat whilst providing considerable fire support from its chin-mounted spiral wave disruptors, which sweeps the landing zone for enemy infantry, along with 8 general-purpose missile launchers, including plasma, concussion, and smoke charges, enabling it to engage heavier targets. During the 2371 Maquis conflict, they would receive an additional turret of 6 anti-fighter missiles to protect them from the increasing numbers of Maquis fighters. The Regnar was designed with dump and run tactics in mind. The ship would deploy its embarked troops while dumping its entire armament into the combat zone, and then quickly return to its mothership for a full resupply. Generally, this would be on an Ekor or Keldon class assault cruiser. The Ekor can hold up to 4 Regnar in its shuttle bays, while the larger Keldon holds 8 in its dorsal assault module. Altogether, a full line of 4 Ekors and 3 Keldons carries 40 Regnar, which can deploy 1,200 troops in a single wave, meaning that a single assault line can quickly overwhelm a planet by the rapid deployment of overwhelming force. The Cardassians found great success with these tactics, which went on to influence both Starfleet and Klingon doctrines for planetary landings. However, the Cardassians' Dominion allies had a different approach. Since Jem'hadar transporters could penetrate some forms of shielding, and the Jem'hadar fighter could directly land on a planet's surface and deliver up to 50 troops to the battlefield, only the larger Dominion ships would carry the Mantis-type gunship. At 55 meters long with a wingspan of 54 meters and a draft of 17 meters, the Mantis is significantly larger than most of its counterparts, yet despite this, only carries 20 Jem'hadar, disembarking from the prow or rear assault ramp. Since the Mantis is not the Dominion's primary means of planetary landing, it adopts something of a supporting role as a close support shuttle. It is armed with a fore and aft Polaron phaser, 2 Polaron disruptors, and can carry a variety of ordnance under its wings. Unlike the Regnar, the Mantis operates on a to-the-last-man basis, remaining overhead to support its disembarked infantry until they achieve their objective or they are wiped out. Only then will the Mantis return to its mothership for resupply. This variety in tactics can also be seen in the forces of the Allied powers, the Klingons using a hybrid of Cardassian dump and run tactics, in conjunction with smaller starships such as the Bird of Prey landing in a similar fashion to the Dominion, to achieve victory through overwhelming speed and aggression, whilst the Romulans' tactics lean more towards those of the Jem'hadar, using the heavy firepower of their Kestrel gunships to clear a path, only disembarking to fight man-to-man as a last resort, whilst Starfleet adopts a more flexible approach, utilising a wider range of specialist craft like the Argo shuttle, capable of carrying 30 passengers and an embarked terrestrial vehicle, whilst close support would be provided by the Type 10 tactical shuttle, being incredibly small and agile, yet well armed with phasers and micro-torpedoes. It can quickly move around the battle space and provide rapid support to infantry units whilst evading attack from larger air units. While many are quick to dismiss the importance of individual infantry units, these small differences can often have an impact on the overall outcome of a battle. Some powers, most notably the Klingons and Romulans, make use of multiple infantry types. Later in the war, the Romulans would supplement their professional legionaries with more expendable Riemann shock troops, while Klingon Marines, equipped with their disruptor pistols and blades, are the most iconic Klingon infantry. In any protracted planetary campaign, regular infantry units were deployed, often wearing heavier armour and helmets, and carrying longer range weapons, to say nothing of the many Imperial contingents containing Orions, Gorn, Kryosians and Kenziti regiments. While Starfleet did experiment with similar specialist infantry, such as the Andorian Ice Brigade, or the Vulcan Desert Legion, or the elite Starfleet Marines who would spearhead key planetary landings in the latter half of the war, they still retained most of the same characteristics as the regular infantry. The standard Federation infantrymen wore a black one-piece uniform, yet unlike their ship-based counterparts, these uniforms also provided significant protection to the wearer. Underneath the black cloth is a conductive Kevlar weave padding, which provides protection against most solid projectiles and disperses the impact of energy weapons, turning what would normally be fatal hits into treatable wounds. If penetrated, the padding is self-sealing, preventing any further damage from exit wounds and preserving the integrity of the wearer's body. For offense, they are equipped with the model 2367 phaser rifle. Derived from the phaser model of the previous year, this was the standard issue phaser rifle for all Federation troops, featuring a double-handed customizable grip for different hand configurations, a retractable holosight for easy target acquisition, and a fire control system for maximum accuracy. This weapon fulfills numerous roles on the battlefield, from area suppression to room clearance to sniping. All these roles can be served by this single weapon system. However, for a soldier to get the best out of this weapon requires extensive training and experience. By contrast, the small arms of the Dominion are much simpler. The Cardassian disruptor rifle had already seen 46 years of service even before the Dominion War due to its simplicity and reliability, lacking the advanced fire control and targeting systems of its Federation counterpart. Similarly, the Cardassians also made use of protective body armor, with the Tostuda armor system entering service in 2369, replacing the old Ractlaw full body armor. The Tostuda consisted of a single armor carapace worn over the torso, with additional sleeves protecting the upper arms. The legs and forearms have no protection, but this allows greater mobility to the wearer. Like its Starfleet counterpart, the Tostuda protects its wearer from projectiles and disperses energy weapons. It is also thicker than the Federation equivalent and can prevent penetration from shorter bladed weapons. But its main advantage is its economy, for a rapidly expanding military such as the Cardassians. Equally, many of the other combatants opted for lesser protection, the Jem'hadar specifically wearing no protective equipment, instead emphasizing aggressive tactics with their Polaron rifles. Unlike most weapons of the period which fired continuous energy beams, the Polaron rifle fired a concentrated pulse of Polaron energy. Rather than having a stun and kill settings, the rifle had wound and kill. The wound setting could easily take off limbs and contained an anticoagulant, forcing the enemy to devote precious resources to evacuate wounded soldiers. It was as callous as it was effective. The weapon could also mount a short knife-style bayonet to allow the Jem'hadar to rapidly close with the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. The weapon was also light and could be wielded with a single hand if shouldered. Its ergonomics facilitated the Jem'hadar's more aggressive tactics. It is no coincidence that similar ergonomics were incorporated into Starfleet's newer, more aggressive weaponry, such as the Model 2373 phaser rifle, coming in a long-barreled battle rifle and a short-barreled assault rifle pattern. These could similarly be held in a single hand and could be shouldered for greater accuracy. The high-velocity pulses allowed for greater rate of fire without giving away the shooter's position. However, these weapons were only issued to elite naval units and Starfleet Marines. The majority of Federation troops used the older model phaser rifle throughout the duration of the war. All these factors can be seen at work during the invasion of Betazid. After driving the defending fleet from orbit, the Jem'hadar began to besiege the planet, attacking and boarding the surrounding space stations and orbital facilities. 6 hours later, they were reinforced by the assault divisions of the Cardassian 15th and 19th Orders. After they had secured a safe approach corridor above the planet, the Cardassian Brinnock torpedo cruisers and Vasad monitors, along with their Dominion allies, opened fire and broke through the orbital shield above the city of Ara. Through this hole swarmed 42 Jem'hadar gunships and 122 Cardassian Regnars, along with 18 Jem'hadar fighters, delivering 1,740 Jem'hadar soldiers and 3,660 Cardassians to the planet's surface, while the local garrison of 8,800 security personnel were quick to react, opening fire with anti-air weapons and moving to encircle the landing zone before the invaders could break out into open country. However, only half the troops managed to make it to the landing zone, and there were no prepared defences, and so the thinly spread troops came under withering fire from the descending dropships and were unable to contain the Dominion troops as they charged their positions with bayonets, forcing the defenders to fall back and concede the landing zone. Meanwhile, the anti-air defences were taken out by Cardassian Kopesh fighters, clearing the way for the next wave. With the landing zone secured, the Dominion pressed forward to take out local transport inhibitors, and defense turrets. Meanwhile, reinforcements were arriving in the city, but slowly, as the transport inhibitors worked both ways, forcing the defenders to rely on shuttlecraft and hoppers. At the same time, the fleet in orbit continued to break more holes in the shield, sending landing craft through some and decoy through others, causing the defenders to panic and overstretch their forces. Meanwhile, the main landings continued, with the second wave deploying from the Cardassian assault ships, and an additional 5,000 Jem'hadar beaming down. The second Cardassian wave landed and moved to the roads running between the city and the main defense installation 11 kilometers to its west, isolating the fortification, while the Cardassian first wave began to surround the city. At 15:22 local time, 2,100 Jem'hadar attacked the defense installation, which was only defended by 400 security personnel, their reinforcements being held up by the Cardassians holding the road. After holding out for 6 hours, the facility fell, with all 400 defenders being killed by the Jem'hadar. With the installation under their control, the Dominion lowered the shield covering half the continent and projected a dampening field which prevented the use of Federation transporters but allowed the operation of their own. From there, the Dominion moved to storm the city. Jem'hadar beamed onto rooftops, Cardassian dropships swept along the streets, all whilst the infantry charged in on all sides. By this point, the 3,780 defenders were facing 13,000 Dominion troops on all sides, and at 20:52, the garrison surrendered. With Ara and the surrounding territory secured, the Dominion had secured their foothold on Betazid, and from there could build up their forces to take the rest of the planet, and with complete control of the surrounding space, any attempts to counterattack would have been engaged from orbit and would suffer extreme casualties. Over the next 72 hours, 50 transports arrived in the system, deploying an additional 180,000 troops along with heavy equipment. When the Dominion commenced the second phase on the 15th of October, the campaign lasted only 12 hours before the planet surrendered entirely. Ironically enough, the well-developed infrastructure of Betazid made it extremely easy for the Dominion to hold and occupy, and many of the troops who had spearheaded the landing would soon be on the move again, as the Dominion fleet continued to sweep through system after system. For these troops, the war was an endless cycle of breakneck pace, violent operations, in which their success in fact hinged upon their chaotic nature. While the Dominion and Cardassian fleets swept across the Federation in great phalanxes of purple and gold, these soldiers followed behind and would face the true reality of 24th century warfare, their sacrifices and sufferings ignored in favour of their glamorous, spacefaring counterparts. Nevertheless, they were vital to the Dominion war machine, just as the Allied soldiers were vital to that campaign of liberation that followed. But they too would see and do things which we can scarcely imagine in our darkest nightmares, fighting and dying on strange alien worlds far from home. This is the reality of modern war.